Hey, Mr. Andrew Huang. We're here at Superbooth in the park at the Fez.
Lovely. I didn't imagine there'd be so many trees surrounding this venue.
It's beautiful in some ways, but from a cellular data technology point of view, it's pretty poor. So, first time at Superbooth?
First time at Superbooth, yeah. Third time in Berlin, but I always have a great time here. I'll come back anytime I have the opportunity.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, you know, your kind of recent, at least public interest in modular stuff you must be in heaven, right?
It's overwhelming. It's almost, you know, I never would have thought there would be too much modular, but somewhere in there, we've crossed that line.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there comes a point, it's like overstimulation. It's very... Yeah. Do you find that you've got no kind of memory buffer? It's just filling up. You can't remember anything from 30 seconds.
It becomes a blur, for sure. At an event like this, too, where you're just like booth to booth and running into people that you only know from online. And yeah, it's just, as you say, overstimulation.
Well, that's an interesting thing. I mean, we both have the same sort of thing because we operate in the same world. I mean, you have a lot of people that know you, but you don't know them. It's this kind of... It's a sort of gentle form of celebrity, which is it's quite charming in many ways, right? Yeah,
so far it's still, you know, nothing harmful has come of it. It's just nice to meet other people who are tremendously kind and into music, and yeah, there's always something to chat about.
So I wanted to kind of get a bit more inside you and what you do creatively, because I mean you're I don't know how trained you are as a musician. You seem very highly accomplished.
I have some training, classical piano. I went to university initially for classical composition and then found I really didn't think that could be taught very well in that kind of an academic setting. So just kind of did a smorgasbord of different musical classes. I learned to play tabla, I learned a little bit about synthesis, but mainly like in terms of learning music production or anything about electronic music, that just came from magazines, online forums, YouTube videos more lately. Right. Yeah, so that side of it is a bit more self-taught.
Because I mean, I am generalising here, but you seem to move towards the more sort of popular side of music. You know, your stuff is direct and immediate and kind of catchy and well crafted in that way. Have you got any kind of hidden progressive rock kind of genes in there or anything going?
I guess you know, I do love and appreciate lots of different genres of music, and I dial in a lot of different influences into what I'm creating, and I think there's sort of two things at play. One being that, you know, I am interested in pop among the many other things that I enjoy listening to and creating, but then as you grow an audience and you think about what's going to land, you kind of tend towards some things more than others. And you know, I'll still drop, like the other week I put out some kind of old school, like Warp Records type instrumental, like IDM-ish stuff. And was really happy about that, but of course I know it's not going to get the same kind of response as like doing a singer-songwriter kind of thing or doing something just more kind of EDM, beat-driven, and I guess simpler.
Yeah, I guess audio's driven. I mean, which sort of brings me to this kind of, how did you get here? Because I mean, in a lot of ways, I guess, you know, you studied music, you were into music technology. I guess, was the plan to be a songwriter, be in a band, be a kind of traditional music kind of approach, rather than get into the whole YouTube video side of things? I mean, how did that work out?
Yeah, it was a really kind of, I guess, organic process that really kind of from step to step, I just instinctually kind of honed in on what I'm doing now. But I started, I feel like, how lots of people do, playing in bands and gigging and, you know, at home experimenting, learning how to record, figuring out DAWs and whatever little hardware synth I might be able to afford at the time. And just trying to figure out how to get music out there, how to get my original stuff out there in front of people. And what I ended up doing to for work basically was writing music for people, eventually in kind of a traditional sort of commercial production music kind of realm, but at first I just had a website and anyone who found me online could commission a song for me. So I was doing weird stuff like for like $200 I'd write a song for your dog, or like whatever people wanted, something to walk down the aisle to at their wedding, a jingle for their podcast. So I was doing that and then made contacts through that to eventually start doing like a car commercial
Yeah, I mean, I
grocery store
imagine that
commercial,
sort of
yeah.
thing really kind of busts your chops, doesn't it? You really, you've got a right to order, and there's not a great deal of cash in it, but you do it for love. But
Yeah, yeah.
but that sort of almost that musical playground is really important in the development of a style and method and the way that you can learn to
Yeah,
do things.
definitely for workflow, it was huge because at the height of it, I was turning around probably 15 pieces of music a month.
Wow, that's like library
And
music
there's
kind
like
of
quick
rates. Yeah.
things, but also bigger projects sometimes mixed in. And yeah, so it was a really kind of skill sharpening period of time, and also a broadening of my horizons, because someone would come and say like, oh, I really want this to sound like a Parisian accordion piece, and I'm like, I've never written one of those, but I'll load up Contact and see what I can do, and it worked out.
So I guess there was a point. There must have been a transition point where you go, hey, what happens if I make a video? Were you drawn to do it just because you wanted to, or did someone suggest it? I mean, how did you kind of start the whole YouTube side of things?
I was always interested in music videos, and so I started trying to produce some music videos for my original songs, some self-produced and some with friends who were into film. But as I started posting on YouTube, I realized that there was this huge community growing there. Also that it was a big search engine, so it's a way to be discovered. And when I started noticing the ways that people were kind of changing how videos are made to fit the kind of online model, it was really eye-opening for me, and just learning about vlogging and eventually a little later on like unboxings and these kinds of things, and of course demos and tutorials, and just finding that things don't have to just look like what we grew up with on TV. It doesn't have to be a music video or a documentary. There are all these kind of micro genres and even new genres that have popped up because of what YouTube allows.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we both know about niche specialist niche within YouTube. I mean, music technology is a very rich mind because people need to know how to do so. I mean, you started off by more kind of describing and helping people figure out creative processes through limitations, right? Was that the sort of...
Well, I guess my channel's been through a lot of iterations. I started just posting my original music. I did some audience interaction stuff where people could suggest ideas for songs. Eventually, the thing that kind of went viral a few times were these creative constraints videos I did where it was like, okay, I'll try and only use a balloon to make a track. This kind of found sound stuff was really taking off for a couple of years. And then maybe about 2 years ago, I started talking about my process just because I felt there were things that my listeners just would completely miss about what I put into my music. And through that, I discovered that there's just a huge amount of people going to YouTube to learn how to create music for themselves. And so as that's kind of developed, I've made more videos that are kind of just geared towards more basic concepts in music, not necessarily the weird trick that I found that really worked for my one track here, but just something that could be useful for anybody who's starting out or maybe even a little further along.
I think that's the key, isn't it? Because as you get, particularly in music technology, there's this sort of assumption of a sort of base level of knowledge, but not everybody's there yet, and there's a lot more people who aren't there yet than there are.
Exactly. Yeah, lots of beginners, and I try to always walk the line of making it entertaining still for someone who's more advanced to be watching my videos, but always trying to keep it accessible where if it's the first time you've ever heard about synthesizers, I'm not just going to be spewing jargon at you, but I can at least bring you along for a bit of the ride.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. I mean, I often find myself kind of perhaps thinking, actually, this is perhaps a bit technical. You try and go, but it sounds like this. This is cool if you do this. That kind of stuff.
And I mean, there's also the audience for the technical stuff, and I don't go as far as I might like to sometimes in the name of keeping it more accessible. But I think there are other great channels, and yours is one. Some of your videos for sure, where you really get into detail about all the possibilities with a given piece of equipment or technique. Yeah.
So, when you started moving more into the kind of the gear side of it, is that your sort of your selfish side to a degree, kind of, I want to get into it, because I mean now you have a lot of power and a lot of clout in ways, so you get exposed to stuff that perhaps other people can't maybe get their hands on. So will you kind of just think, hey, I'm digging this, this is where I want to go?
Yeah. I guess what I decide to put on my channel is a whole mixture of what idea was most exciting to me that week, and what do I think might perform well on YouTube at a given time, and then also just trying to keep in mind the story that sort of is unfolding for people who have been following for months or years, where I think that's the way to get the most out of my channel. If you've kind of seen the progression of where I've come from and something I'm doing in today's video, you might understand better because I previously covered this technique or whatever it is in a previous video. But all these kind of motivations culminate in what I end up doing on my channel. So yeah, the gear thing has happened more in recent years. One, because I've been able to afford it. Two, because people who are seeing my channel now and seeing the reach it has want to be in touch with stuff. So I'm just learning about new things directly in my inbox almost daily. And yeah, it's just something that's always been interesting to me. And until recently I couldn't really afford to really dive in, but I was always interested in hardware. Like when I first started out, I had the Alesis Ion, and I had one of the first Korg Electribes, and I was like really into finding ways to work outside of the box, because so much of my time was spent in the box.
Yeah, well, that's another thing, isn't it? I mean, there is a very different dynamic relationship. I mean, I'm making an assumption here, but I assume that when the ideas flow, you work fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Try to make decisions quickly, and I like to think I choose the right tool for the job. And I know there's a lot of people who really don't want to work in the DAW, and they don't want to have a computer involved in their music making, and I think that's absolutely fine if that's what you want to do. But definitely, when I'm working, let's say, with the modular, when I have that moment where I'm like, okay, the patch is sounding good, I'm going to multi-track it over to Ableton and finish it there rather than continuing.
Yeah, well, so do you suffer from modular time like everybody else? It's you start something and then you look up and it's like, oh man, I've missed my meeting, or it's now dark.
Yeah, it's you can definitely get into that zone. But I guess I try to sit down with it when I know I'll have a good amount of playtime. Yeah, it's hard to just turn it on for 10 minutes,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that approach to music where you try, or when you're working fast, I mean, do you take the same approach with your videos? I mean, do you start with a rough shape and you just kind of almost stream of consciousness it out? I mean, it seems like it's very natural the way that you do stuff, or even though in the post it's got a kind of script, it seems post-scripted almost, you've got your little things, the high fives and stuff, but you ultimately, is it more stream of consciousness?
I would say it's a half and half. Like, I'm glad it comes across naturally, but sometimes, I don't do this so much anymore. There have been videos where I script it down to the word and might deviate a little as I'm filming, but for something maybe more technical or an idea that I really want to make sure I put across the right way, I actually script an entire video. Most of the time it's like point form, what do I want to get across, and then I kind of go for it, and yeah. And
I guess because you've famously also worked with some really big brands. I mean, kudos for getting those kind of connections.
Yeah.
But they want to see probably storyboard almost to the nth degree, or you get a bit more freedom. I mean, how does it work in there?
It's interesting. Every brand is different, and it's kind of nuts to see the breadth of what people want or how they work. And so some people do want to see a script. More often than not, it's like a rough concept and then one or two revisions. The thing that I've found that drives me nuts is there's like no red flags I've really found. There are sometimes someone approaches me and it seems like super janky, like not a deal I want to take, and it turns out they're amazing to work with. And then other times the people who seem the most professional, like it all falls apart somewhere in the middle, or they don't pay you for 6 months. Or so I don't know. I just try to take on the videos where I think it's going to be a good video and hope the rest
I mean,
works
there's
out.
an aspect of following your instinct. I mean, that's the thing that, that's the thing that's really great to see. I mean, because I don't know how old you are, but you're not as old as I am. And it takes a long time to trust your instinct and think, even on a bad day, I know it's going to be okay,
Yeah. Well, I'm older than most people would say. Look, I'm 34 now, but yeah, it's. I think that's something I'm coming into just in the last couple of years too, of really just being more sure of myself and the direction that I want to go to, rather than being swayed around by what's trendy or what opportunities are being thrown my way.
Well, and also, I mean, once you have a brand and you have the presence and the reach that you do, you get to call the shots a little bit. People are approaching you because they want what you've got rather than you want just the gig, right?
Yeah,
so it's a very different relationship.
So being able to have that power to walk away and say no to things definitely changes it.
So do you get time to do much of your own music now, or is it mostly tied in with the creative process that is for a video?
Yeah, it's kind of, I try to make it a sort of synergistic thing where a video that I want to use to maybe show off a technique or a piece of gear, or just jump on something trending. Like, for instance, I, of course, made a couple fidget spinner related videos last year.
Why wouldn't you?
And so one of them was, it's called something like "Make a Beat Before a Fidget Spinner Stops Spinning." And so the gag is that I just keep on spinning it anyway, but I never show myself spinning it. It seems like it's spinning forever, and I just make an entire track, and I put it up on iTunes, all within the time of this fidget spinner spinning. And that was just a kind of way that I thought, I've got 1 million views on that video now for a track that I really wanted to put out. And it was just a kind of a way to knock both things out.
That's pretty neat. So do you find, I mean, obviously, you're first and foremost a musician. I mean, is it translating for you in terms of people discovering and buying your music digitally or however else they might consume it? Because, I mean, lots of people will consume things just on YouTube, which is okay, but there's this sort of, as an artist, there's a thing which is like, it's nice to sort of go, ka-ching, there's another 30 cents for, whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I used to probably get about a third of my revenue from Bandcamp and iTunes and that kind of thing. And then as streaming took over, that all shrank. But at the same time, my YouTube channel was just exploding. So now I think the videos are much more the focus and people are really coming to learn. And then there's sort of a trickle down to my original music where, I still have a great following. I think 50 or 60,000 people following on Spotify and listening regularly, which is amazing. But definitely, YouTube is an entirely different realm.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I mean, I guess when you're at college and learn or listening to music, in your teens or whatever, and there was a model which, it was probably nearly over then, but it was still something that you would relate to and aspire to, and now it's sort of gone, and you kind of have to, in many ways, create your pioneering your own way of doing it, and it's like make it what you want, right?
Yeah, and it's super strange too to navigate all the new ways that there are to experience music or to turn it into content, or I think about things like more people are going to see the Instagram photo that I post today probably than are going to hear the song that I'm working on and uploading, and maybe I'll put a snippet of that here and try to get a few people over, or like use it in part of a YouTube video. But it's it's a weird.
I know what you mean. It's
process.
Like we'll do a kind of here's a photograph of a cat on a synthesizer, or here's my in-depth review of the. Yeah, I know which is going to get more hits.
Exactly.
That's kind of hard to deal with, but in some ways, what we do and what you do, which is kind of get inside the music. Do you think it's counteracting the sort of commoditization of music as a product, as a sort of, just a thing, just a piece of digital data?
I think the interesting thing about that's starting to happen is I think that the music making process is opening up so much more, and there's more of a community around that now, in addition to the communities that there have been around an artist or a particular genre of music, which is really cool. So, I watch someone like Cuckoo's videos, and admittedly, I know that he's got an album out. I've listened to it once, but I go back to his channel much more often, and we have this kind of relationship of me learning from him and being entertained by him, and we share a lot more in that area than in just an artist to listener sort of capacity.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, obviously music is generally an emotional experience, or can be, or it can be just a sort of you like the tune for whatever reason. So you get, it's a deeper, I suppose it's a deeper relationship. That doesn't sound too kind of hippie.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different one where, I mean, if you're making music and you're learning how someone else makes music, that's a different kind of connection than listening to a piece of music and being moved by it. It's hard to say which one's deeper, but they're both deep.
So you're performing, and you do perform live, which is not something, you know, I've only seen a couple of videos of you doing that.
Yeah, I
kind of
don't
stuff
do
on
it too
YouTube.
much. In the past year, I've only done one until this weekend. I've only done one performance, which was sort of like half talk and half performance, showing how I do some of my sampling stuff on YouTube. But with Superbooth happening, I brought out the modular synth. They asked me to do a little set yesterday, and I'm also performing at a party tonight. And I just ran into Andreas Snyder, and he said, come play at an after party tomorrow, so I might do that as well. But yeah, I've got a couple different patch ideas going on my little IntelliGel 7U rig.
So you traveling, like, is it kind of carry-on size?
Yeah, it's the maximum allowable carry-on modular synth size. So I've got that. I also have a pocket operator that I've been throwing in for a little beat here and there. Yeah, that, and I might do some vocals on top.
Right, okay. And so what's really floating your boat now in terms of where music technology is going? Are there any kind of directions that you're kind of more excited by than less excited by, say, for instance?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I think the last thing that really grabbed my attention was Rolly's stuff. Just having that level of depth to, you know, controlling an instrument, an electronic instrument that expressively, that was really cool. I still feel like I'm trying to catch up because I felt like I don't know, in the past couple of years, I really felt like, oh, I've found the things that I'm good at and the things that I want to do, and I kind of wonder if I should just chill for a bit, do a bunch of creating,
right?
And
well, there is that you can kind of become addicted to process, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. Which a lot of it can be interesting, but you know, if your goals are to finish pieces of music, then it can get in the way. But yeah, it's hard to, I guess that kind of control surface and other, like the there's a Wave Ring by Genki Instruments.
Oh yeah.
So I think that kind of development in terms of interfacing with more than just a keyboard or a mouse, I think that's one of the most exciting things.
Because again, it's a lot of the it's like using your voice. If you could see, I mean, I guess with you're looping as well. You know, you could build things very quickly, and that short trip from brain to idea to something actually that is, it is really liberating, right?
Yeah, I think that's really cool, and I'm excited to see where that goes, because there are just so many different technologies for turning a human gesture into data that can be used by an electronic instrument. So I think a lot will start happening there.
Excellent. Andrew, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.